this time, it is my absolute pleasure to introduce our presenters for the day. Ross Picardo grew up in Western New York as a first generation Sicilian American. In 2003, he earned his Bachelor's of Arts in Religion from Houghton College, and in 2007, a Master's of Divinity from Asbury Theological Seminary. He graduated with a Doctor of Ministry from United Theological Seminary in 2014, and an MBA in 2021 from Dakota Wesleyan University. During his senior year of college, Ross entered the ministry as a military chaplain, serving 4 years in the Marine Reserves and 5 years in the Navy Reserves. While attending seminary, he recognized a call to serve the local church, and his experience in all facets of church life through roles ranging from church custodian to associate pastor to church planner, executive pastor of church planning at Gringhamsburg Church for 5 years, where they had 3 campuses with over 4,000 worshipers. Roz also is one of the founding pastors at Mosaic, a new multicultural church in Dayton, Ohio. Callie Picardo loves the Lord and has a passion for prayer, discipleship, and generosity. She is the author, preacher, teacher, and encourager. Callie holds a Master's of Arts in Christian Ministries from United Theological Seminary and is currently working on her Doctor of Ministry degree. She and her husband, Ross, are the co-authors of Money Talks, a biblical take on earning, saving, spending, and giving, and Healthy Money, a 30-day journey towards spiritual, emotional, and financial freedom. They also co-host the Better Together podcast with Callie and Ross Picardo, and guest speak and teach together on the topics of finance and generosity. Callie, an active member of the preaching team and the praying ministry at Mosaic Church, and since 2019, she has served as a delegate to General Conference, Jurisdictional Conference, and as a delegation treasurer. She is the vice chair of West Ohio's Council on Finance and Administration.
Thanks to catch up.
And a member of the Great Miami River District Strategy Committee. She also serves as the Vice President of Development at United Theological Seminary. Ladies and gentlemen, I am so excited to have these wonderful individuals to present to you today. It is going to be an awesome topic. You're going to enjoy them, and you're going to take so much away as we already have. So without further ado, Callie and Ross Picardo, take it away.
JC, thanks so much for having us, and Sophia and Cheney and the Center for Congregations. We are delighted to be with you guys today. JC shared our bio, but friends, ask questions as we're going through. Here's the beauty. You've got Roz, who he is fully in the church. He's pastored. He's started churches. He's restarted churches. He's done urban, suburban, everywhere in between. And then my ministry is in the fundraising side. Like, I love numbers and spreadsheets and encouraging generosity. And right now, that for the past 9+ years, I've been doing that as vice president for development at United Theological Seminary, but I've also worked at community foundations. This is my passion area. So don't hesitate to drop questions in the chat as we go. We'll make sure to try to get to all of those.
Thank you, Callie, and thank you, JC, for that warm introduction. JC is my hype man, so I need to go on the road with JC. I wanted to start off our time together and ask you, on a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being the least and 10 being the most, what is your level of comfort when it comes to finances, especially in the church? So from a level of 1 to 10, 1 being the least comfortable and 10 being the most comfortable, go ahead and just drop that in the chat right now. And that kind of helps us gauge where we're at today. We got some coming in. Go ahead. Yep. Love the participation. When I was in seminary, they did not have any finance or administrative classes. And little did I know that the role of pastor meant not just preaching and teaching and doing weddings and funerals, but also having a supervised staff, which some of us are doing in our setting. Others of us are trying to figure out how to pay the bills. We're looking at spreadsheets we don't understand. That was me graduating from seminary. And I remember being in a finance meeting and feeling so embarrassed because I couldn't follow along with the rest of the folks. And I vowed to myself, I'm not going to allow this to happen again. And so I memorized the pain of that moment and chose to educate myself. But I was blessed to have Callie as a partner who's been my coach and somebody that I've looked toward. So we all are from different perspectives, different experiences when it comes to the area of finances. And the topic of this talk, funding ministry with 5 loaves and 2 fishes, was birthed from a familiar story that I'm sure you all heard about. It was the feeding of the 15 to 20,000. We know that when the multitudes were fed after following Jesus, in our faith tradition, we see that the disciples were a little uneasy because these followers have been following Jesus for hours, perhaps days, and the people were starting to get hungry. The disciples brought this up to Jesus, and we often just skip to the fact that the miracle was in the multiplication. In that multiplication was the event, and that's it. But I want to propose something different for the sake of our time together today, that it wasn't just the multiplication of taking, blessing, breaking, and multiplying, but it was in the recognition of the ordinary gifts that were available at the time. And it was Andrew who noticed the little boy's lunch. And I would argue that the miracle, one of the miracles, was him having the eyes to see the possibilities. And so as we go through what our 5 loaves and 2 fishes are, we are hoping for breakthroughs for you in your context. We're not experts. We're just practitioners. I'm a practitioner just like you, and we live it, we breathe it, and we've been through it, and we've learned from memorizing the pain to also memorizing things that have been magnificent. And so the first loaf, when we think about funding ministry with 5 loaves and 2 fishes, is simply this: it's vision. We hear this often thrown around numerous times, but vision is so important. I believe it says somewhere that without a vision, the people perish.
And so you may have a very clear vision for your church, a very clear mission that you are passionate about, but you might need to do a little work in this area too. Or maybe you have one that needs looking back again. What is God's calling for your congregation in this season? But a key thing to know is if you want to have partnerships, if you want to have funding, it's going to be driven by mission. The mission drives the money, that drives the resources coming in. And so people need to know what the vision and mission are in order to know what they're getting involved in, what they're partnering in, what they're giving to. And so some good questions to ask is to start by asking these 3 questions. First one is, how has God uniquely shaped you and your faith community? You might think, well, gosh, we're all in the same faith tradition. Yes, but what's your history? Where has God placed you? Like, where are you geographically located? Who is coming to your church? Who does your congregation feel called to reach? Like, who are the people that are a part of it? I mean, our church has a large recovery community that's been a part of it. We're also a multi-ethnic congregation. And so we started having foster and adoptive families come because everyone in the church had someone that looked like them. Your congregation is not going to reach everybody, but that's why there are multiple congregations. And so across all of it, you're going to hit people, but who has God called your congregation to reach? Second one is, how has God used us in the past? So some of the clues can come from what's our past? What's our story? Not getting stuck in the past, but what's some of the legacy of what God has done before? And then the question to think about is, based on the past and the present, where might God be directing us in the future? So have some conversations with the leaders in your church and see what might rise up. You might be surprised what comes, and the vision can be birthed out of that.
And as Callie mentioned, doing this homework, this is looking at your context, which is very important, and looking at your history. And when we think about that, we also look at our assets. And we have numerous assets that we don't even realize. Andrew saw the little boy's lunch. No one would have thought that was an asset, but the miracle happened because of that recognition. And so, what are your assets? Of course, our biggest assets are people. Um, People are the greatest when it comes to being able to deliver the message, deliver the fish and the loaves, and dispersing it out. But when we think of other assets, it might be the things that we own, the things that we value. One of them that we hear about more often than not are our facilities, because as often as our facilities can be ones that we need to update, or it could be hard to renovate, they are still an asset, because trust me, there are congregations, church plants, and others that would kill to have a permanent location. Because even now, in a post Christendom world, when people ask, hey, where are you starting your church? It's not what the name of the church is, but it's often where, because we still associate a congregation with a facility or a building. In our faith tradition, which is United Methodism, John Wesley, the founder of Methodism, said that the world is his parish. Yes, he fully affirmed that. He was an Anglican priest until the day he died, and then these people called Methodist, as he started to rally them, he had some rules for them because the movement was growing. And so one of the instructions that he gave was, let our chapels be built plain and decent, but not more expensively than is absolutely unavoidable. Otherwise, the necessity of raising money will make rich men necessary for us. And so pretty much live within your means is what Wesley was saying. I've seen churches that build because of their heyday, and they overbuilt, and now more than half the building is empty, and you have to heat it and you have to cool it, and you have to upkeep other means by it. And so Wesley gave these instructions to his followers because he didn't want them to build extravagantly, but to keep it simple and functional. Our buildings today are not simple and functional. We are wishing they were. They may appear beautiful on the outside, but they're not so much on the inside. And so, how do we use these assets that have been given to us? Because your congregation paid for that building long ago. People worked hard and put money in the offering plate to do it. This church that we're looking at right now is one of those stories where people literally built this church brick by brick and were donating money and sacrificing hard. And little did they know that the neighborhood was going to change in years to come.
So this was one of our churches in Lexington. We're in Dayton, Ohio now, but before that we were in Lexington, Kentucky, and we were worshiping in a movie theater. And we'd been trying to figure out a space because the movie theater was only available to us on Sunday mornings. And we had a lot of things that we were having to rent space to be able to do during the week or find homes, but we were growing. And so our denomination said, well, here's a church that if you would like to pastor here as well, you can have the building, which of course had deferred maintenance. It was one of the biggest churches in its day. It was actually the church our church plant had come out of, but then had declined. So now the planting church got adopted by the church plant, if you can believe that. And so we went in, and part of the challenge was you heard a lot of, well, I remember back in the day when it was standing room only. Well, I remember when these Sunday school classrooms were all filled, and you get stuck in the past. But as you start to look at your assets, view them with the lens of possibility. And some of it can be a simple shift of language. So instead of getting stuck in the remember when, you've done some of that missional work, but what's God calling us to today? And that what might God want to do language can be really powerful. So if someone's like, well, I remember when, you can just respond with, well, what might God be calling us to today? Part of the challenge is sometimes these beautiful assets do have some deferred maintenance as well. And so some of it is figuring out, how do we steward that? How do we make it so it's not a liability, but truly an asset? And so one day, Raz and I arrived at church and we come into worship, and some of the ceiling in the sanctuary was on the floor of this building. And we realized, oh, that roof needs replacing sooner rather than later. The finance team said, well, let's go out and see what loan we can get. But fun story, when Raz asked me to marry him, I said yes, but we got to go through a finance Bible study together if you want to marry me. I promise I did actually say
Story.
just yes when he asked me. But then as we were going through the premarital counseling, I said, this is an area I really want to be on the same page. And so we went through a personal financial Bible study together with a group from our church. But it helped shape us. So as we were learning how to steward our own resources, when we got to the church, we said, well, we could go out and get debt, but that might deny God the opportunity to provide. What if there's another way to do this? And so sure enough, there'd been some damage to the roof in the past from storms. And so insurance covered part of it. But we also put out the need to the congregation, and we had generous gifts to the point where we didn't have to borrow money. Not that you don't ever end up needing to borrow some funds, but if you can avoid the debt, if you give them the vision of what God's calling us to do in this space today, sometimes you'll be surprised how God wants to provide in some creative ways. Go ahead, Raz. What are some other assets that might be lingering around?
Well, as we arrived here, so we were in a theater and we were maintaining that and this facility. We were in an urban environment. We did not have big givers. We had college students, we had unhomed folks, we had empty nesters, we had a variety of people that God was bringing into our midst. And as this area transitioned and changed, some of the remnant congregation that was there from years ago continue to stay. And so, as Callie mentioned, we were able to get a roof on, but we looked through the facility. All right, what do we have here? And I quit referencing it as a church building, and I started to call it a ministry center, almost like a community center, that this belongs to the community. So how can we use it as such? And so looking through the assets, we ran through and found some handbells. Well, we hadn't had a handbell choir in 20 years. Well, guess what? There was part of our roof money right there. And so we were able to sell those, got like $15,000 for them. At another church, we did the same thing, and that ended up fueling and funding ministry. And I know if some of your parishioners were listening right now, they would be covering their ears. And so don't repeat that story, even though I've written an article about it in the past. But look at what you have that you don't have to use, that you don't need, that you can part with to be able to fuel and fund the ministry. One of those things for us was unoccupied land. And the church at the time had a parking lot that they never used because they were planning for future growth that never came. And not only that, but it became a sinkhole with a water detention place, and it was just kind of an eyesore. And I said, what if we sold this lot? I don't know how much we'll get for it. And people kind of laughed at me. Some of the old timers laughed, which is fine. I was a young whippersnapper and I didn't really know what I was doing, but we got a hold of a realtor. We put a sign out in the lot across the street, and before long, a developer got a hold of us. We knew that there was a housing shortage in Lexington, especially mixed use income that wasn't pricing people out, but could help bring diversity in the community. And so before you know it, a dream began to emerge that around that church facility, 80 units of mixed use housing was built. And it would turn that church into the center of the community because the properties were surrounding it. And we would be able to then help find housing for people in an affordable manner, and the developer offered to do all of our landscaping, which would save us thousands of dollars in an ongoing way. And we would have a built-in congregation and a lump sum of money. Now, we partnered with him because of the asset it would be to the community and to the church. So you have to be careful in getting involved in these situations that some people just want to get your property and then they'll do whatever they want there, or they'll build high rises, or they'll, do luxury apartments. These are not luxury. This was in line with our vision, and it totally changed the landscape of the community. But we wouldn't have ever tried it if we didn't end up putting one of those signs in the lot. And so these are the Arlington studios that really have changed the landscape of the community. So again, that was an asset that people laughed at, but it ended up paying off in the long run.
They said no one would buy it, but if you don't put a for sale sign in, how's anyone going to even know it's available? One of the other assets that came with this church was a parsonage. Now, there was no way I was going to move into the parsonage, despite the fact that I was married to the pastor. It was not a it needed a lot of love. It still had value, but it was just it was not the nicest of housing, but it still had value. And so we were trying to figure out, gosh, we are doing ministry on a shoestring budget. Is there anyone who would be willing to exchange housing for serving at the church? And so the youth pastor, who was raising his own support, lived for free at the parsonage, and so did the custodian as part of their compensation. So the became compensation to be able to pay for staff where we didn't have the budget to pay them otherwise. At our current church where we are in Dayton, the co-pastor was saying, I'm getting ready to retire. I'm ready to go ahead and buy my own home. We didn't need the house either. And so we were getting ready to expand the space and start a capital campaign. And we said, gosh, if we sell the parsonage, that can become seed money for expanding into a new worship space. So start to think, gosh, what are those things? Even if you think, well, no one's going to want this. How do you know? How do you know until you try? And we also started.
If you caught that, so using that parsonage for either selling it or trading it for some sort of employment arrangement, and incorporating bivocational folks in ministry, and we had people raising support that joined our staff team.
Yeah, we figured out, okay, who's bought into the mission that wants to be a part of this? And so we had some people buy into the mission who were willing to raise support to work at the church rather than the church having to pay them, because they were so bought into the mission that they wanted to be a part of it. So that's why that First Loaves mission. But then as you're looking through the assets, look at some of your unused space. And so we had classrooms that were being unused. We had meeting rooms that were being unused. We had a kitchen in this church. We had the sanctuary, of course. We had the parking lot. We had a courtyard garden area. We had a choir room, even though we didn't have a choir. We had the stage, storage areas. And so we found a photographer that wanted to use some of that space for his photography studio. We found a music program that needed space, and we were across the street from an elementary school. And so they could use some of the classroom space, and another after-school program could as well. We took the choir room and it became a cafe. We wanted to, if we had space, we wanted it to be usable. We brought in a food pantry, a clothing store. We had co-sharing space and music practice space. All that came about because we started looking at what space do we have? What might be opportunities to use it? At United Theological Seminary, where I work, we had moved to what was an old Jewish community center But as a seminary, we wanted to have a chapel, and we had some money given in an estate gift for it, but it wasn't enough to do the grand chapel that everyone wanted, this beautiful big space. And so we started looking at, well, what do we have? Well, we had a long rectangular fellowship hall. There was a bookstore that had been closed down because everyone was buying books on Amazon. And then in between, there was some storage space. Well, we said, what could we do if we knocked down these walls? And then how could we make a cinder block rectangular room worshipful? And so we worked with an architect and figured out a way with a very limited budget to take what was a simple space, John Wesley style, making it worshipful, but not with the grand plans originally done. But it was because we started to look at the assets we had and what might God want to do with the assets that God had given us.
And in the back of the seminary space, there was a parking lot that really was in disrepair, and there used to be a swimming pool and basketball courts, but all of that was really in disarray and wasn't maintained by anybody, or the city or the school didn't have the funds. And so instead of just giving away, which they thought they were going to, they listed it for sale, and an ex NBA player decided to build a dome where they could do work with at-risk youth and have basketball camps and games. And now that has been a game changer within that community.
We thought maybe we could give it away and then we wouldn't have the expense. But one of our trustees said, just try to sell it. And we were like, but that's just the wood. We called it the woods and the weeds. Who would want the woods and the weeds? Well, when we offered it for sale, we found out someone actually wanted it, and it fit in alignment with our mission and is a possible partner too. And so it helped seed some of our fundraising that we were doing at the seminary as well.
So some of these things that Callie mentioned, some of them were ways that we could generate income outside of the offering plate for the church. And others were just in-kind service. And so I didn't have a social worker on staff, but I needed one. And so we gave space to a social worker who worked for another nonprofit, but we welcomed them in because they were helping to serve folks in our congregation, in our community. The after school program that started up now is running itself and has more than probably $1 million budget and has really taken off. Now, I've been gone for 10 years from this church, but it has taken off. They've started now an immigration law office and some of these other things that have really taken shape. The music program, the teachers would walk the kids across the street to the school for their practices. And when they held their concerts, guess where their concerts were? At the church. Guess who would they invite? Mom, dad, grandparents, whoever it may be. And before you know it, there were over 100 kids coming to the church every single day between the music program and after school program. Now, some of those spaces could then afford to pay rent and others couldn't. But we had to determine who it can be a part of our vision and mission. You just don't let anybody in if it's not congruent with who you are. They have to be congruent with who you are.
Upstairs.
Oftentimes we make the mistake of allowing anybody in because they just show us a little green. You can't do that. It has to be congruent in having some tight guidelines in terms of leasing. We didn't position ourselves as, oh, we're the landlords, but we're partners in this with you. And so having partner meetings are crucial. Having those quarterly conversations are critical to make sure everybody's on the same page, because it's not a problem until it's a problem. And so being able to think outside of the box and knowing that you don't have to do everything on your own. If there's a church down the street that is doing a clothing bank, partner with that church. You don't need to start your own. Or if there are congregations that want to help with funding something, work together, because you're going to be able to make a greater impact. And I'm firmly convinced that we are better together. Cal, do you want to add anything to that?
No, you're getting in some to the next level, but do you want to talk about the open bids that we're doing
Yes.
right now at Mosaic?
And so we're in a position now, we're fortunate that our church has seen growth in this era, that churches are not growing as rapidly. And we're a multi-ethnic, multi-generational, multi-income recovery. We're everything at our church, and we're out of space. We see new, what we call new converts coming in, people that were unchurched before, dechurched, and so we just need a larger space. And in an era of buildings that we just talked about, we want to build a multi-purpose center where it can be used for anything and everything. It doesn't have to be just restricted to worship. And so there's some folks in our congregation that don't have the big high dollars to make a pledge. And we said, all right, many of you own your own businesses. You were homeless 10 years ago, and now you own your own business. And you're in your upright mind and you're sober. Do you want to make a bid on some of these things? And that's how they've indicated they want to give back. And so we've allowed this process, and we're seeing these bids come in because people want to give back and give a discount as a way to bless us. So this is an incredible way for the church to benefit, but it also benefits the individual and everybody together.
So some of it's
So,
figuring out, is there a way to save on expenses,
yes.
other ways to grow income? So with the assets, with looking at the people resources as well as the building resources, where could you generate some income, but also where can you save some expense?
So this is a good exercise to go through with your board or your team or some trusted individuals in your community, congregation. What are assets you currently have that you aren't using? So think about that and how your community can use your building. And how much of your building is used during the week? So on average, a church is using only about 32%. Yes, that's right. 32% of the space they have available on a given Sunday. And these same congregations use probably only 25% of their sanctuary seating capacity, but they're spending more than a third of their budgets on heating and cooling and maintenance of all their space, which most of which is not used. So think about that as you maybe.
And maybe drop it in the chat even now. I mean, we're
Yeah.
sharing a lot of stories, but your stories are powerful too. And so someone on on this webinar might need to hear, how are you thinking about the assets you have and how might it be useful? So if you've got any creative ideas or any assets maybe you have that you're like, I don't know what to do with this, but I know we've got it, go ahead and pop that in the chat, and you might inspire someone else on this webinar, or they might have a thought to be able to share back with you.
So where did I learn partnership from? This is, again, another loaf. This is our third loaf. We already hinted at that. One of the great partners where I learned partnership from, ironically, was a brewery in Lexington, Kentucky, Wessex Brewing Company. This is an 80,000 square foot building that was an old bread factory. But in it, it wasn't just beer. It was partnerships with groups like the Broke Spoke Community Bike Shop, the Roller Girls of Central Kentucky, the Planetarium, which is an innovative and co-sharing space, the Breadbox studio artists, photographers, you name it. There were a bunch of groups involved in this. Oh, and by the way, the owners of West 6 would give back at least $100,000 back into the community of Lexington. And I thought to myself, that sounds like what the church should be doing, is being a blessing and a benefit to the community. So how do all these groups come together under one roof? That's what we tried to really pinpoint. And so as you heard us talk about after school programs and all of these things, we didn't start them all, but we were able to bring folks together for one mission, and that was to impact and ultimately change our community.
And so think back to your mission, because the partners you choose need to align with your mission. And they'll be compelled to get involved when they see you doing powerful things in the community. So not all of our partners were Christian. Some were, some weren't. It depended what they were doing, if that made sense. The music program after school, not Christian, but willing to share some of their musical gifts on a Sunday morning. We partnered with a Christian nonprofit that was helping women who needed to kind of get a second chance to restart. So we worked with them. We had a Christian after school program in the basement. We had the UK radio station, University of Kentucky radio station. They wanted an all ages venue for concerts. We said, well, our worship space is a great all ages venue. If you don't need alcohol, we can open that space. There was a nonprofit there's Clean Kentucky and Seed Leaf that both worked with community gardens. And so some of the youth in some of the after school programs got involved, learned about gardening and where does food come from other than the gas station, how is it grown? They learned how to grow things with their own hands. And this group worked and ran a community garden out of some of the green space that we just happen to have. It was one of the assets of the church. As Roz mentioned, we gave space to social workers. So we had a outreach worship service on Monday nights that had a community meal and the food for free, and the food bank was open. A lot of people who came needed extra resources, and that can take a lot of time to get people connected in. Well, Lexington Rescue Mission had people who already knew all the resources, who were already doing it, who were already trying to work with the same group of people. And we just said, hey, would you like to have office hours out of the church for a couple hours on Mondays right before the community meal? And then as people came with needs, we could say, come at this time, someone will meet with you, and they could help get them connected. Sometimes you'll find partner churches even outside your own denomination. It might be some that you even meet through a Center of Congregations event. They're so good at connecting people, or they might know someone you could connect with. It was interesting when we were in Lexington, some of the other United Methodist churches were like, you're trying to seal our people. We're like, no, we don't want your people. We want the people that aren't going to any church or our D church. We want to connect people in, and we don't want people who are already in church. But there was a Baptist church across town that was in the suburbs who wanted to make an impact in the community. And they said, we'd love to help run a backpack program out of your church for the school across the street. But we want to connect those people with the church. But we know they're not going to come to our church across town that's not on a bus line. Can we do it out of your church and then connect people to your church? And we said, sure. And so we created space for them to run this backpack program. And it just became a beautiful partnership. At our current church, we're a church plant here in the Dayton area, but then we adopted an older congregation that had been looking at their asset of space, but also realized they were getting older and had been praying about reaching the community. How are we going to do that? Well, it just so happened God brought us together. That's a fun story at some point, but we adopted this older church, still very healthy, not allowed deferred maintenance. They own their property outright. And we adopted some of their ministries as well, but some of them needed a shift. And so they've done the adoptive family model for Christmas, which is such a gift. But then sometimes families get stuff that they know they're not going to really like, their kids aren't going to use, but that's what these nice church people got them. So we partnered with some other churches in town to do a free Christmas store where families in need could come and shop for the gifts that they actually wanted to give their family. We provided the coats, hats, and gloves. Another church provided the toys. Another church provided other items, and we came together to do it. And then we could connect people into the same Christmas store. We had a diaper bank that was looking for a partnership in the community where they could help get diapers to families in need. We said, we partner with a recovery ministry that's faith-based that does residential recovery. And they have a maternity house so that we have a lot of moms with newborn babies. And so they said, well, can we come in and run a diaper bank out of your church? We said, sure. So it becomes these connections. Even the state of Ohio had a free coat program and needed partners to be able to help with distribution. I mean, you think back to the 5 loaves and 2 fish. Well, the disciples, part of their role was helping distribute. We became a site for distribution of free coats that the state of Ohio wanted to get to those in need. I mentioned the Joshua Recovery Ministry. I mean, they've become a powerful partner, and They are a separate 501c3 nonprofit. They've got the residential homes, but they're faith-based. And so everyone in the program, they want to get connected to a church. We are a church that is very open and welcoming, and we've got a Wednesday night recovery service. So a lot of them end up coming to our church Mosaic. Well, then they get through the program and they go to graduate. Guess where they have those graduation services? We have them at Mosaic, and invite the director to come up and share about the ministry. And then we give them a journal and pray over them as well. But a lot of our folks are spiritual mentors. And so we're partnering. We're not doing everything. We're not even doing the bulk of it. But then that can become some of the outward outreach work of the church because of this beautiful partnership. And so we'll get into this part more in a little bit too. But then guess what we have right after that graduation? Well, that's when we do the offering moment. And we can say, hey, lives are being transformed, like what you've just seen, because of your generosity, because you're giving of your time to be spiritual mentors, because you are praying and getting involved in the mission of the church. So some of these opportunities for partnership become part of the ministry of the church because it aligns with our mission, and then we can connect it with the vision for future giving as well.
See, we looked at it as a victory anytime someone walked through the doors of the church, regardless of what they were there for. And we made people feel welcome, and really rolled out the red carpet for them. And so, as Callie mentioned, one of the areas, of course, is being able to partner, and money outside the offering plate. And that is crucial and critical, but we can't neglect the offering plate as well. We'll get to that in a bit. However, I want to lift this up. If you're struggling, and you're part of maybe a mainline denomination, what does it look like to partner with other congregations in buying power, whether it's buying supplies together, hey, graphic artists, different things like that, and do some shared resources that'll be able to help you. I'm a part of a collective, even though we are in a denomination. We're in our own little collective group of churches that have come together, and we do exactly that. We resource one another. We pay into certain things so we can have that buying power and leverage, being able to buy supplies and have staff people that we otherwise wouldn't be able to have. But one of the things that we'll have to start thinking about, and it's already on the horizon and will continue to do, is what we call mergers and acquisitions, or I like to call them adoptions, really. And so we adopted this congregation that was fledgling here in Dayton, Ohio, because we didn't have a facility. And they were declining. And so they were courageous enough to say, we're willing to come together and be one with you. And so who are some of those strategic partners, maybe within your denomination, or maybe you're independent, that we need to think more about coming together to thrive instead of just getting by? And some of conferences and other folks have congregational vitality specialists that can help in those conversations. We entered in a conversation for about 9 months before both churches decided to go forward with it, and we were laying things out. And now the congregation, especially our remnant of what we call St. Andrew, are excited because, hey, we only had 3 kids before, and now we have over 100. And so there's an excitement that has grown and that has multiplied. But we wouldn't have otherwise come together if that need for facilities really arose, and they had been looking for new life as well. And so what possibilities, where are those fish and loaves, those possibilities that we can tap into?
Hey, Raz, I wonder if you want to say just a brief word on mergers versus acquisition, or adoptions, as we call them.
Yeah.
This is not the business world, it's the church word.
Yeah.
So we'll use mergers and adoptions, but both have pros and cons.
Yeah, both have pros and cons. When you merge, sometimes you're matching unhealth and unhealth together. And you normally, the average size after 3 or so years is usually the lowest average of one of the churches. And you would think, oh, if we put 40 and 40 together, it should be 80. Well, that's a fallacy, especially if there's some unhealth. We use the adoption because we were the healthier, newer, healthier church, and we were adopting and bringing them into our family. And with joining a family is being adopted, you take on a new name, a new identity. The way that the family does things, you're kind of grafted in. And so having that clear and upfront is crucial in having those stakeholder conversations. And it's got to work for both congregations, and both congregations have to be willing to give something up for the greater good. And so it's not a process that should be rushed in any means at all. So thanks for asking that, Cal. One of the ways that we have seen further growth in opportunities is through partnerships again. Hey, we want to be able to start other worshiping communities, thinking outside of the box. Sometimes people aren't going to come right to our church building, but they may go to a third space. The first space we spend is where? Home, usually. The second space is work, and those third spaces are those places of leisure, coffee shops, breweries, as we can see, movie theaters, and those types of things. And so we were presented with a unique opportunity, and I want to share this little video with you because this dream is becoming a reality. Let's take a look. Mosaic Church is excited to partner with the Emerge Recovery and Trade Initiative as a part of a broader effort to plant 100 new faith communities in West and East Ohio over the next 4 years. Pending cabinet approval, this new Mosaic campus at Emerge will be a key part of that vision. Emerge empowers people in recovery and former foster youth to rebuild their lives, providing transformational housing and vocational training. Mosaic has the opportunity to create a worshiping community on Emerge's spacious 45-acre campus near Xenia. Our vision is to build relationships, disciple new believers, and create a ministry presence at Emerge to launch preview services and an Easter service on April 20th of 2025. To bring this vision to fruition, we are seeking cabinet approval along with any startup funds that may be available to further this work. Thank you for your consideration, and God bless. So we were invited into this area. It wasn't something that we were seeking out, but as you can see, there's a lot that is taking place there. And as they initiated conversations with us, they wanted a faith partner. And so they are not going to charge us rent going into that area. There's a treatment facility there, intake, and then there's aftercare for folks that graduate that kind of initial treatment phase and have sober living. And that those folks are ready to engage in a community. There's businesses out of that space as well that have called that space their home base. So HVAC place and plumbing and electric. And so there are about 200 to 300 people that walk through those doors every single day that we have the opportunity to build relationships with. And so, again, it's rent-free for us. And after some prayer and consideration and the funding that came in, we decided, hey, we're going to go for it. So we're going to have our first worship celebration there on February 23rd. So
and you saw that was a funding video, and so we were applying for grants with that. Just got news that we probably have gotten one of those, so that's exciting.
Yep.
And then we also did a Christmas offering, was to be able to go toward that. So sometimes people look to give extra funds around Christmas. So we invite our congregation, if you want to do a gift above and beyond what you normally do, you could give toward this exciting opportunity is for our Christmas offering.
Yeah, because people are going to give toward Christmas time. It's just a matter of where. they're going to give extra somewhere. And wouldn't it be great if we were able to present them the opportunity to give to something compelling? And so I know that you, as creative folks, can figure out what that compelling thing is for them to be able to give toward.
So just a couple other partnerships that we have, and we share these not to say, hey, you have to do what we're doing. No, you're going to hopefully figure out who are those strategic partners in your area, but just to get your wheels turning. And you'll see this question on the screen. So as you're hearing these, who are some potential partners in your community? And I've loved seeing the different space ideas and assets that you all have been talking about in the chat. Go ahead, and if you've got others that are potential partners in your community, go ahead and throw those in the chat as well. I'm loving seeing those, and hopefully you're looking at the chat as well to see what others are sharing there. But we've partnered with the local Parks and Rec. There's a group called the Optimist Club. They're kind of a membership club that like to do good in the community. And then we're right next to an elementary school with our current church. And so sometimes the elementary school needs space for trainings or gatherings or things for their teachers. And so we've said, hey, come on over and use the church anytime you want. We've partnered together with these groups to do a fall fest in the fall. So we've got this green space, one of our assets. We're next to an elementary school. A lot of the families for the school park at the church to drop off their kids. So it's a familiar space. And so these other groups came in, and Parks and Rec provided some of the games. The Optimist Club cooked all the hot dogs and everything, provided the food, because let's be honest, food costs are going up. Sometimes that gets expensive. Could the church have figured out doing all of those? Sure. Did we have to? No. And with partnering, it just made it a richer experience. So we partner on things like Fall Fest. We do a spring kite day where we set up a booth. And so we partner with these organizations in the community. They have their groups that come because they've put the word out because they're involved. We're putting the word out. And so it's a way for us to connect with people that we might not otherwise connect with because we're partnering. So hopefully that's given you some thoughts as we thought about this third loaf. So who are your potential partners in the community? Go ahead and share some of those as we get ready to go into the fourth loaf.
And this fourth loaf is the funding piece. And so, again, you can't neglect the offering plate, and we'll have more to say about that. But how do we fund ministry with the 5 loaves and 2 fishes?
So this is my favorite area because I love encouraging generosity. And you've got to help with what donors want to know. And so think about this, it's all flowing from that first loaf of mission, but they want to know, does my giving make a difference? Like, do you even need my gift? Like, isn't there someone else who can give for this, or I might not be able to give as much. So I don't know if my gift even matters. They want to know, do I matter to my faith community? Like, do you actually care that I'm here? Do I matter? And for those that are wealthier, do I matter beyond what I give? Like, do you actually care about me as a person? Which y'all are probably really good at with doing the weddings and funerals. You've got a lot of opportunities to build relationships. Plus, you've got 52 Sundays a year. So these are opportunities to build the relationships on an ongoing basis. Also, how will my resources be used? What's it going for? And what is the vision I'm giving toward? Back to that mission vision. And what is the plan for reaching it? And how can I get involved in the ministry I'm financially supporting? So, I want to be all in. So you can ask for money, but if I've got skills, can I actually serve? Do you need people praying? That's a powerful way to get people involved, get people engaged, but they want to know, what am I giving toward? It can be really when it's hard because there are so many needs that feel like no one's going to want to give for this, but we need to pay the electricity bill. No one is going to want to pay for this, but we need to pay the salaries. But you use those spaces for ministry, and those people that are being paid are also engaged in ministry. So one of the things to think about is, instead of saying, hey, you got to give so we can keep the lights on. No. Here's some of the ministry that's happening out of this space. This ministry is happening because of your generosity. It might be that a lot of the funding for that ministry is to care for the space, to provide for the staff to do it. But as you rethink about how you're communicating and point it all back to vision, point all back to mission, point all back to the powerful things you're doing, sometimes by just changing how you talk about giving can encourage people to give. We mentioned earlier how where we place the offering moment. We strategically talk about the impact of giving, what dollars are accomplishing, and we say thank you during that time. My biggest pet peeve is when I go to a church and they say, and now the ushers are going to come forward for the offering. No other communication at all. And it's just, don't feel bad if that's you, but just know you've got an opportunity to grow in this area, because that's an opportunity to say, here's something that happened, even if it's a one person story. You might think, well, gosh, we're a small church, not a lot's happening. Well, look for those individual life changes. Remember, Jesus talked about the good shepherd who left the 99 to save one. Okay, so what are those one life stories? You might even get someone to share a testimony. That can be so powerful. If we have baptisms or new members, we always do that right before the offering, because then we can say, hey, because you gave, this is happening. But think about how you're tying it in. And you might think, gosh, they're going to get tired of hearing me talk about giving all the time. We'll also take that time to say thank you. People don't get tired of hearing thank you. So you can, some of those Sundays of the month, just say, thank you, because you gave, this is happening. This is why we give you, and then spend most of your time saying thank you, and then say, hey, if God's put it on your heart to give again today, here's how. And then give them some easy ways to give. You know, we always talk about, here's how you can give online. We still have the ushers come around. We use fishnets because we picked that up at pandemic rather than passing an offering plate, which has germs. You know, the usher just can reach over with a nice little fishnet that we used from when we were worshiping outdoors in parking lots. We said, well, this is actually convenient, because sometimes there are spaces between people and they don't want to get up to move to pass the plate. So that's the way you can do it as well. You can think about text to give. Some churches use Cash App. Think about what are the ways that will connect with the people you have. We did a web.
Go ahead. I was about to reference that. Go for it.
Yeah, we did a webinar this fall with the Center of Congregations about inspiring generosity, where we really focused in on the generosity, the funding piece. And so they are making that webinar available again, the recording of it. So you should have that link sent to you, but just know that that's been opened up again for another month. So if you want to dive deeper into that topic specifically, it's there. But here's the biggest thing. Don't deny people the opportunity to give. It's easy to say, well, our folks are so taxed already. Yes. But don't be their no. Give them the opportunity to give, not with guilt, but don't be afraid to ask, because there's this mission, vision, tie it back to that. Give the opportunity, but give it with grace, and give them the opportunity to say yes. Or if they can't give right now, they're still hearing that mission, and they might give another time when they're more able. And there are some folks that just need help with their finances overall. You heard me share, I made Roz go through a financial Bible study with me when we were engaged. That helped put us on the right path. There are a lot of good how-to resources out there. We wrote our first book together, Money Talks, that gets into some of the more how-to. But we also knew there were a lot of people that we knew that knew what they should do. They knew they should budget. They knew they should avoid debt. They knew they should save for future purchases. But there was some underlying stuff that was blocking them. So Roz and I wrote a book called Healthy Money with I love the tagline. It's a 30-day journey towards spiritual, emotional, and financial freedom, because often they're combined. And so it's a 30-day devotional that gets beneath the surface to some of the underlying mindsets, how people are wired, to some of their childhood money experiences that have formed them, to some of their own personal adult experiences, but the victories and some of the trauma they've gone through that might be holding them back financially, even though they know what they should do. And so we also made it into a kit, a church-wide kit that a church could use to be able to roll it out with sermons, liturgical resources, digital assets to go alongside it. There's a code or a free code for a free online assessment to figure out your money mindset. And so if you are interested in that kit, Sophia has put the link for it in the chat, but the center also has some kits that they have graciously purchased for you to make available to you free of charge. So if you would like a kit, make sure to ask JC and Sophia, and I know they will get you one, because sometimes it's the teaching piece that needs to go alongside it to help those that want to give, and they just can't because there are other things in their lives that are holding them back financially.
So we've talked about partnerships, we've talked about different assets and opportunities. It's a both and. We can't neglect the offering plate, but we have to take advantage of other resources as well. This is what is unique about 501c3s that are separate from the congregation and the church entity. But it's crucial. Don't just start a 501c3 to start a 501c3, but you have to have a clear focus and guide to be able to do that. And it can really complement your ministry. African American churches have done this historically for decades. My friend Rudy Rasmus in Houston, Texas, has done housing and being able to provide housing for folks, and Bread of Life Ministries to feed people. So whatever that may be, the former church I was part of had one 501c3, but under that they had various ministries. They had a car ministry to help people fix their cars and be able to bless them in that way, and a furniture barn, and used medical equipment like walkers and things like that. So there were several things when we think about, because if I have an outreach person on my staff, and we have this 501c3, what would it look like for them to be able to lead that 501c3, still do outreach for the church, but somehow, get the whole goal is that you would offset your regular operational budget somehow with that in a legal way. I'm not saying break laws and all that, because with 501c3s, you still have to have your own board, your own set of books, your own finances and procedures. So a lot of times, younger folks, they get really excited and say, "Oh, I'm going to start this or I'm going to start that." You need to make sure you have a team in place that is really going to own it and drive it for it to be able to work well. The reason people start these 501c3s is it opens you up for grants that you otherwise wouldn't be able to get through the church. Now, there are some that are available to faith communities that you don't have to have a separate 501c3. So I'm in the state of Ohio. I applied for a grant recently. It was $1,000 free money. I was able to get it, and it was for a service project during Martin Luther King Jr. Sunday. And so we were able to do that. There's mainline denominational grants. There's grants through different foundations. Sometimes those are exclusionary of religious entities, and other times they welcome them. I mean, the Centers for Congregation has access to all of those things. If I was a pastor in Ohio, I would be salivating right now, because you have the opportunity to partner with such a great organization that can help you on that pathway and on that journey. So there are a lot of different opportunities. So if you do start a 501c3, make sure you have a clear focus of what you want to do and how that's going to benefit the overall picture and landscape. Cal, do you want to add anything to that?
No, that's really good. But first look and see if that nonprofit already exists out there, because you might not have to start it. It might already be there. But that leads us to our fifth loaf, which is the loaf of outreach. And I see a lot of churches that cut the outreach because of all the other expenses. And so that's something just to be mindful of, that this is an essential loaf that we can do, but we can also do on a shoestring budget. Sometimes it doesn't actually have to cost as much as we think it does. And this is why it's built on, we've already talked about partnerships, the assets we have, how we can partner with others to be able to do outreach on less expense. But even as you're thinking about those assets, think about those people. Because remember, people are God's greatest resource. And often they're people in our communities that have gifts, that have a heart, that have this burning bush desire inside of them where they just really want to create something. I have a donor that I get to work with who, she was passionate about reaching older adults. Her church was an older group. The community they lived in was becoming a great community for people to retire in. But the church was so focused on reaching young people because young people are our future. That's important to focus on young people as well. I'm not saying don't focus on young people. God had just given her this burning bush, though, of people are retiring here. They need community. A lot of them are unchurched. What if our church became that bridge? And so they started a nonprofit and started working out of the church, this older adults group, where they were having people who knew how to do different crafts coming in and leading a free class to make crafts. They were having others teach skills, how to use the internet, what's AI, that, they could teach different things. They could have workout classes. It was kind of based on who had what, but it came from this individual congregation member who wanted to connect people to the church and had a passion to reaching older adults. So what are the passions inside? Do they align with that first loaf of mission vision? Are there assets available? What do they need? Don't let them should on you. Don't let them say, Pastor, you should. Well, God's given you this vision, so let's pray about it together. How might God want to birth that? And it might take some time, but there's some outreach that can be done. But just thinking through doing a cultural exegesis, who's there? What's the outreach that's needed? What does the community actually need in this season?
Yeah, this just as we were taught to exegete scripture, we do this for our communities. And so, what are the strengths? Always start with asset based. What setbacks, and then what are the opportunities? And so, based on those first two questions, you're able to really see what ministry could look like. And so, in one of the communities we lived in, there was nothing to do for kids. They were getting themselves in trouble. The school district was failing. And so we were able to partner with the school and just have movie nights at the church and do things like that that went a long way, because taking a family of 5 to the movies was very expensive. And so we were able to advertise even in the schools, and be able to meet some needs that way. So there are so many creative ways to do low cost outreach. And again, it's through partnerships and ways of being able to say, we don't have to do it all ourselves. Hey, who can donate popcorn for the movie night? It could be this organization or that organization. And so start thinking through who those potential partners can be. We've been able to.
I might add something there. With some of doing the culture exegesis, we realized the typical vacation Bible school or kids camp model needed to shift a little bit. So sometimes it's figuring out our outreach isn't reaching people. Does our outreach need to shift? We've always done it this way. Is there a different way to do it? Well, when we looked at our community, the community was big on sports. So we did mega sports camp for our vacation Bible schools in the evening. They got to learn a sport for 4 or 5 nights during the week, but there was a Bible lesson to go with it. And so it might be shifting how you do your outreach if what you've been doing is no longer reaching your community.
And here's just some of the things, building relationships and tensions in this time of tension with some of our first responders, and really working with them. Again, coffee, they donated the coffee. We came together, played kickball and had pizza, and someone donated pizza. But the final one, and I know that we all have our own traditions, so I'm not going to impose this is the way you should do it. For us, that other essential piece is prayer. I'm not going to say too much about this, but I've written a few resources on it. If you want to check out Dynamite Prayer, that could be one, and that's a 28-day resource. But it's really getting the congregation to pray together, not just the old school phone a friend, here's the prayer request, but what area in your church do you really need a breakthrough in, and surrounding and circling that with prayer?
And you can prayer walk your community, prayer walk spaces. You can really, we count prayer as kind of like that preparing the ground, the undergirding work to using all these loaves. And as you get people praying together, it gets them open to new possibilities. And so as you're praying a prayer together, they can get them thinking, oh, well, this new opportunity, maybe this is the answer to the prayer we've been praying because we've been faithfully praying and looking for God to move. And then Roz, one more fish so here's is the fish of teams. Who are the people that are going to distribute and deliver these together? Who are your people? Don't try to do it on your own. Who's the team that's coming together to make this all happen?
Yes, the days of the solo heroic leader are done, and so we need to work together and equip the saints for the work of ministry. And with that, we will welcome any questions that you may have for us.
Ross and Callie, there was one question in the chat that I just saw, and I believe that comes from Shannon Abbott. And she said, are there income and tax limitations as a 501c3, which churches that limits churches to charging rent to outside organizations for use of rooms in the building?
Yeah, that's a great question, Shannon, because you got to be careful as a church. If you start doing things to earn an income, there's something called UBTI, unrelated business taxable income, where all of a sudden you're a non-tax entity, but all of a sudden you got to start paying taxes on that income because it's not related to the core of what you do. Rent is typically excluded from that. There are a couple exceptions. So I saw your question come in, and so while Roz was talking, I looked up a little IRS article for you, Shannon. So I'll send that your way if it's helpful. But typically, rent is not counted as a taxable income that you have to watch for, with some caveats.
Yeah, and you just want to, I can't remember the threshold, but for us, it wasn't anything we had to worry about. Like we weren't bringing in all this amount of money from all these resources where it was questionable for us. So, but it's good to keep an eye on that. And that's why I have people like Callie in my life to keep me out of trouble. I want you all to stay out of trouble as well.
Another question for Callie and Roz is, how do we encourage members to open the space to and partner with outside organizations during the week? We all have members who are worried about people getting into the church things and feel like someone from the church has to be in the building if anyone else is going to be there.
Roz, do you want to take this or you want me to?
You can take it. I'll just add, I use the pulpit to leverage vision. And so when I want to see something happen that I feel like God is calling us and directing us, it's a sermon series. It'll end up in a devotional for the leadership team or whoever it is. And it could be, hey, how do we foster hospitality? What does it mean to be hospitable in our day and age today? And I know that's a big topic, and it carries a heavy weight. But how I would even relate it to their home. How do you make people feel welcome in your home? Do some people have refrigerator rights? Do others don't? Do you have to prepare when they come? Is everything clean, neat, everything in their place? Do you leave a little mess out and just keep it real? So I think if you kind of preach and teach it, that helps break down the walls some. Callie, you have probably some other.
Yeah, just a couple other thoughts coming to mind. With the communication again, reminding people this is God's house. It's not our house, but we are in charge of stewarding it wisely. So, again, figuring out, does this group align with our mission vision? Are they a good partner? Are they going to partner with us well? Like, do we trust their leadership? Sometimes it might be, and then having good communication with that partner. So, you might come up with here's our agreement. Here's what our partnership's going to look like. What do you need from us? Here's what we need from you. In order to have this space, you got to take out the trash. You got to clean it. If there is anything that you break, you got to fix it. Like, you can spell out some of these things and have those good conversations up front. I think being willing to have the conversations and explore is better than just saying, oh, we're too afraid. Like, what if, no, all the possible things that could go wrong, we just shouldn't open the doors at all. Well, let's have some conversations and see if it might work, can be really helpful. And again, to pointing it back to vision, one of the groups that people are often scared of is having kids in the building. Because what if the kids break something? And we took our kids to a hotel this weekend for my mom's milestone birthday. She turned 40 again. And they immediately walked in and they tossed a Squishmallow and it broke a lamp. And I'm like, oh my goodness. So, we told people and we fixed it, but that does happen. And so just naming that type thing is going to happen, but this aligns with our mission and vision, and it's who we've been praying into. It's who we want to be. And so it's better, I'd say, to open than not, but just make sure it's a good partner and aligns with the mission and vision.
Callie and Ross, can you speak to helping all the partners get along? We have our meetings, and while we all have similar mission and vision for our neighborhood and ministries, we have had some significant difficulties with personalities and policies.
Yeah, I'm grabbing my charger, by the way, right now.
Okay.
I would say to that is if you could have a basic, I don't want to call it a contract, but a basic covenant. How do we want to treat one another? And if you can come to the table and create that through a variety of sessions, that can be your operating guide. But until you're able to have that, you don't know what you're aiming for. And so that's the hard part. And is there power differential in that as well? So I would say the covenant is huge because so-and-so may not know it's a problem that their kids are running around pulling the fire alarms. I mean, we've had groups from different cultures use our facility in the past, and I've gotten reamed by some of my folks before. This was in Lexington, and I'm willing to do anything for the sake of the vision and mission. But I didn't know some things are a problem until they're a problem. So I think being able to address it in a kind way is huge. And having those quarterly conversations are critical instead of letting things pile up, but also not being nitpicky either. So it's a balance. But again, I think it comes down to that covenant. I don't want to call it a contract, but this is the way that we're going to treat each other. This is my expectation from you, and this is what you can expect from me.
You've also had the joy of getting to end some partnerships.
Oh yeah,
too,
I've had a partner. Yeah, and there's if you've never read the book by Cloud and Townsend, Necessary Endings, that's a good one too, because sometimes there needs to be sometimes you inherit partners. You're new into a church and you're wondering why is this group meeting here when they kind of hate the church and hate what we're about, but they use our space. And I've had to end those kind of situations before because I didn't see any benefit for the church. Now you got to be careful because you don't want the church's name to be mud in the community, but you need to assess, okay, what's the win for it needs to be a win for everyone. We want to be fair as much as we can to everyone.
I have another question. Do grants exist for building funds?
You go for it, JC.
Okay.
I know, JC, I was going to say, turn back to you. What does the Center for Congregations have?
So yes, there are quite a few resources for building funds. It depends on what the building fund is. So nationally, there are funds for churches that are like doing multi-purpose building, and so that can be different. There are funds for actually what we're talking about now, which is partnership. There are grants through the Center for Congregations that would help support architecture consulting and building consulting. Our equity grant does go to renovations that small churches need, rural churches, minority congregations as well. So there are quite a few resources out there for building funds and building campaigns. And we also have some consultants, and we work alongside churches to help you get ready for building funds or building campaigns as well. So um, uh, if you have any other questions, please reach out to my office, and Sophia, we'd be glad to help you. Can you have a list of the building fund resources? Absolutely, you can. I'm actually going to create a collection on our CRG and then send that link to you all so that you can see those resources that are available. Well, all right. Well, listen, thank you all so much. First of all, thank you, Callie and Roz, for being available and for being so wonderful. This information is invaluable, and I'm hoping and praying that churches are taking this, absorbing this, and making their congregations brighter and better. And so not only their congregations, but community as well. And so I want to thank you very, very much for your expertise. And thank you all for joining us. Again, after this, you're going to receive a copy of the presentation as well as an evaluation. I'm going to send you that collection. Give me a little bit of time, you all, to put that collection together because I want to give you solid resources. So give me some time to put that collection together, and everyone on this call will get that collection. And it'll just be a link that'll have multiple resources that you can then peruse at your leisure. Okay. But thank you all again so very much. I'm honored. I appreciate it. You all have a wonderful evening, and we hope to see and hear from you soon.